It all began, I used to be a reporter on a local paper in East London, and the true story was a true story. I remember a black guy came to the office having had a hell of a time from the police. His wife had actually died of an ectopic pregnancy. They thought that he'd performed an illegal abortion and gave him a total grilling until the result of the post-mortem came through that it was an accidental death. But his life was destroyed, shattered by that. That story has always stayed in my mind. I thought I've got to write it, but it was just an anecdote or just a hard luck story. I couldn't see how to do it until 1979 with Thatcher coming to power. And suddenly realised all the rules, all the game plan was going to change. One of the early things she said she was going to do was give the police a vast pay rise. But you don't start paying unless you're going to use that muscle. And so it's with the kind of fear of what was going to happen under Thatcher, I suddenly put that story from the past on election night, and it came together very quickly. I actually wrote it in 3 days. I remember I'd never written anything as fast as that. I think I was burning to write it, but couldn't see how to do it until I said it on election night.
The New Dawn.
The intention was to try to make an audience angry and feel compassionate, to change attitudes. I found it strange writing it and was quite shocked afterwards. There is a great deal of racism, sexism in the tactics of the chief cop. When I was writing it, trying to get into that guy's skin, I did go to a second-hand shop and bought a suit, a blue serge suit, and a pair of Dr. Martens, which I found by dressing up to write his stuff. I know this sounds so hardy, but it worked for me. I was suddenly trying to get in his skin. I think it was real schizophrenia, acting the racist, sexist cop and trying to write the compassionate, innocent victim whose life is going to be destroyed by this. I found it very hard play to write. I found very drained afterwards.
I did it first about 10 years ago for Theatre Royal Stratford East, Philip Headley. Jane Howe directed it. And then Bolahan Mabesian offered me it last year at the Young Vic. And when I received the script, I read it and just remembered that it was just such genius writing and so relevant and important. I rang up my mate Rob.
Clint phoned me and said, I'm doing Sus again. What about speaking to Barry, the writer, and we take it on as our next project to do it as a film?
So I got the number of Barry Keith from Philip Headley, called him up. Barry said he'd do it and come in as a producer.
So it was a matter of us getting together and seeing whether we could logistically do it for very little money because we had no money. The original 4 people that got together was myself, Clint, Jono and Robin. And we sat down and talked about whether we could do it. We decided that it was a brilliant idea. Everyone loved the project. We went away and we thought, right, let's raise some money. Let's talk to actors about playing the other 2 parts. The next day, we realised that meeting took place on the 3rd of May, exactly 30 years after the play takes place, after Maggie Thatcher won that famous election. So it was kind of fate, really. It was one of those things that it all kind of came together very quickly, and then within sort of a month and a half of us meeting, we were kind of shooting the film.
I was actually amazed at how slick it was because there were only maybe a dozen of us there working every day in Elstree, but it was a massively intense period and very, very focused. And, we only had 10 days.
I think I should go back there.
It was actually a joy to work on. It was actually the best fun I've had on a film that I can remember.
Because we didn't have the time, it meant that we didn't really we didn't fiddle with things or change things or spend too much time kind of pontificating. So it ended up being a organic kind of adrenaline-fueled production. For me, luckily, we had Barry's writing to always fall back on. We could trust it. We could trust the writing because it was so good and so strong and so powerful.
Everything's been done on the cheap and begging, borrowing, but that's with incredible adrenaline. They got it all together. I think the thing looks rather classy, actually. You can't believe they did it for so little money. Also, likewise with the time, they only had 3 days to rehearse it. And it was a phenomenal job. It's quite, for the central actor playing the chief cop, Ralph Brown, it's so many illogical things he has to say. It really is a great feat of memory because nothing seems to connect with anything else. It's like area bomb. He's trying to break the guy, and so he throws everything at him in no logical, chronological, rational order. I think it's just astonishing that they managed to learn this thing so quickly. I think it's a real act of love from everyone involved in it.
I remember phoning up Barry one day and saying, look, I've just asked him to sign this thing, and then just as he looks like he's about to, I've actually changed tack and gone somewhere else. So what's going on? And he said, you've got to enjoy yourself. You know, he's enjoying himself. He's enjoying making this guy comfortable and then suddenly making him uncomfortable again.
So, you live at, oh! Ha! There it is.
I used to enjoy the gear changes, you know, and actually put gear changes in that maybe weren't there in the first place. But Barry gave me carte blanche. He said, look, it's yours now. You do whatever you want with it. I've written it, but it's your part, so use your instincts and go with it. And a very generous thing to say to an actor, I thought.
It doesn't feel like it's mine anymore. It belongs to Clint and Ralph and Rafe. It's there. And Rob, the director, it's their film, absolutely. I just happened to do the ground plan for it. But I couldn't believe it. I actually almost found myself crying watching it. I found it incredibly emotional.
It's undoubtedly a tragedy, and it becomes even worse when you realise it actually happened to a man. You feel a huge responsibility to give it your all because he actually existed.
My wife, she died tonight.
On film, ironically, it was probably harder in one sense because you have to stay in that emotional state even while you're not, well, I do anyway, even while I'm not actually filming, but while we're actually there on set, I have to stay in a certain headspace to be able to commit to that.
I tried to bring a bit of wit to it as well. My character, D.S. Khan, I thought he was a very vain character, as well as being a conservative and so on, that he was actually fancied himself a bit, and actually there's a few clues in the script when he starts talking French in the middle, and things like this, and he talks about his holidays and things. And so I kind of had him as this kind of essentially quite dull guy that you wouldn't want to be cornered by in a pub, but who thought that he was actually very, doing rather well, you know what I mean? So he was actually quite pompous, really.
What?
I've been very lucky with these three. Their performances, I do think, are astonishing. I'm so proud of them.
Barry Keefe is such a great writer, and he's so undervalued. You know, I remember looking him up on Wikipedia when we were rehearsing, and he didn't even have a page.
I remember Long Good Friday, which kind of I am associated with. It's not the best thing I've done by any means. But I remember the Lou Grade organisation put up the money for it. I think it was £800,000. This was in about 77. It started on it, and wrote the film. Of course, the film was made. Then it wasn't Lou Grade, it was his henchman, saw the film, of course hadn't read the script. It was made, absolutely hated it, said, this is IRA propaganda. Then, the same breath, can't show this in our cinemas, the IRA will start blowing them up. I remember saying to him, well, why will they blow up your cinemas if you are giving them propaganda? Which he replied, don't get fucking intellectual with me. Which is, sadly, the only time I've ever been called intellectual.
I see I have intrigued you with my knowledge of history.
There's an extraordinary coincidence, by the way. The first public screening of this was the cinema in the Mile End Road, where 30 years ago, the Long Good Friday had its first screening. So there's a kind of real sense of déjà vu about the whole thing.
I hope that people recognise Barry Keefe a bit more as one of the greatest writers of the 20th century.
I think things are going to be different from now on, Delroy.
When I wrote it, it was one critic said, I think it was the Financial Times, said this is a piece of instant political theatre, with the kind of connotation of that is it will have no relevance. It's like yesterday's newspaper, fish and chip wrappings. There is genuinely a kind of sense of real sadness and regret that it still does have a resonance. I thought the repealing of the sus laws, that would have gone, but of course It's got worse and worse with the 2000 Terrorism Act, Section 44. You're 300 times more likely to be picked up now if you're black or not Caucasian than you ever were under the SUS laws. So things actually are worse. The pride of SUS was it was taken up very much by the Stamp Out SUS campaign and also Rock Against Racism. And then, funny enough, under Thatcher in 1981, the law was repealed, but I think that wasn't out of high-minded morality. I think that was in terror of the race riots that have been in Brixton, Bristol, Liverpool, as a direct result of SUS. Suspect under suspicion, that is the SUS law. And it was brought in at the time of the Napoleonic Wars when Britain was trying to raise a navy. How they did it was under the suspect under suspicion. They could pick up any guy on the street. There didn't have to be a crime, any evidence or any witnesses. Locked up, and of course then they were put in the navy. The police then started using it in the 70s to pick up any black guy.
Why it becomes particularly relevant now is because the police want to have more controls and bring things back to a standard of SUS, which is unacceptable.
What's been lovely with the guys I'm working with on this, they've been very, very faithful to what I wanted to do, and I really admire what they have done with it. One of the things the Lodestars of Rob and Clint, they were very central to setting it up, was we want to make a permanent record of this, yeah? And I think they've done that. I'm really pleased and proud of it and proud of them.
I hope that people will see this as something that will govern how they choose to live in this society.
Perhaps sometimes a piece of dramatic writing can have effects on changing people's attitudes. That is my dream.